let's talk about some general things about melody writing. And actually start by talking about something you've already mentioned, that is breaking species. So every once in a while, so the requirements around this species, that the suspension, you have to have a consonant tied over into dissonance that resolves downward by step to a new consonant. That can be tied over either to a new dissonance or to a consonant. If you were to require moving in ties all the time, those rules are restrictive enough. It actually couldn't be done for all canti firmi. In fact, for many of them, it would simply be impossible. It is necessary sometimes to break into second species and just write half notes without ties. Usually, you do that quite briefly, like 2 half notes, and then you're back in ties. You want to do it briefly, get right back, and do it very strategically, as we'll talk about soon. Do it very strategically so that you get back to where you want to be, and you're back in ties, back moving in ties. So the number one thing you want is real suspensions with dissonances. Consonant ties are kind of second best, and then breaking species is what you do least, what you want to do least. Although every once in a while, given the choice between consonant ties and breaking species may actually set you up better or give you a better shape somehow or other. So although all things being equal, we like the ties, sometimes breaking species is actually the way to go. Now, because we really like dissonant suspensions, and they all resolve down, there's this tendency that you have this kind of continuous downward creep in your melodies. So one of the things that you want to be thinking about anytime you have a consonant tie and then you get to leap after that, anytime you break species, chances are you've been going down a lot. How am I going to go up again? Especially, how am I going to go up at some point to a climax? That's something to bear in mind. Within these heavy constraints, it's a harder species to get to work. There are fewer successful solutions given any one cantus firmus and fourth species. But do your best to get that same kind of variety of overall shape, interest, good range, good overall contour, not just kind of stuck in the same band or doing the same thing over and over, all as before, just one climax. This kind of thing. Try and do that to the extent you can. One of the things about the climax, just a quick note about the climax to conclude here. Since we're in ties, and it's certainly best to have your climax in ties, you don't want your climax broken species into second species. That's not desirable. So what the question arises, since you're not allowed to have the climax in the same measure as the climax of the cantus firmus, which measure counts? So let's take a look at this one. The climax of the cantus firmus is right here with this F sharp. The climax of the counterpoint is right here with this E, part of which is in this measure. Does this count as a repeated climax or not? And the answer is that it does not. And the reason is that with a dissonant suspension, the downbeat, the idea is that this note really belonged in this measure, and it's been carried over too long so that it becomes a dissonance. It's not supposed to be there, it's a dissonance, and it resolves down by step to the note it's supposed to be, the D. What this means is that when you're counting which measure is your climax in, it's the measure it starts in, it's the weak beat. This is the measure of the climax of the counterpoint. This is the measure of the climax of the cantus firmus. They're not simultaneous.